exciting. It's just a matter of time before we pull in an Earth. What's the next step of the game? The next step of the game is, of course, to look for signs for life. These planets are dozens of light years away. They're impossibly faint to observe with our telescopes. The best we can do is take that feeble light, a billion times fainter than the star it orbits, and spread it into a spectrum and try and look for what are called biomarkers. That is, the signatures in spectroscopy of elements we think are connected with biology. So you can see from the comparison with Mars and Venus, where the major imprint in their atmosphere in the infrared is carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Earth has that imprint too, but it has the extra signature of ozone. It's a stronger signal than water, it turns out, in the infrared. That's what you look for. And of course, it has water. And ozone is a biomarker. Oxygen is a biomarker. Methane, much of which is produced by biology on Earth in our atmosphere at a trace level, is a biomarker. This is the next stage of the game, to take the best of those Earths and use our very biggest telescopes on the ground and in space. This is very light-hungry, this kind of work. It's why we're building the GMT down in Chile. It's why we built the LBT interferometer here on Mount Graham, is to do this kind of work. It's why the James Webb Space Telescope is being planned to succeed the Hubble Space Telescope. All of these big facilities are going to do this kind of science. And that's going to be the next step. And that may be indeed, in the next 5 to 10 years, how we first learn that we think we found a terrestrial planet with the signature of biology. Remember, on the Earth, if life disappeared overnight, if biosphere went dead overnight, the 20% of the air you're breathing that's oxygen would disappear in 1 million years. It's geologically a blink of an eye. Because oxygen, of course, is very reactive. It will just rust everything and go into seawater and so on. So oxygen is only maintained on a planetary timescale by biology in our experience. And that's why we think it's a good biomarker. Just to put a little sobering thought on this, we might think, oh, great, we'll have an Earth. That'll be a place we can go in case things go south here. No, I don't think so. Well, Earth 2.0 is not going to be exactly like Earth. When we talk about Earth clones, of course, we're talking about similar, not identical. And I don't think any of it relieves us of the need to take care of our planet, because these nearest Earth-like planets are likely, from Kepler, to be actually dozens of light, maybe even 100 or 200 light years away. There is no way we are ever going there in any conceivable time scale. They're beyond our reach for travel, for colonization, for voyaging, even for joyrides, in the future that any of us can see. So we got to look after this planet. So that's the state of the game for microbes. That's where we think we'll look for. Oh, okay, microbes, who cares? Oh, come on, like, it's pond scum. It's the stuff you scrape off your shower curtain. It's yeast. Please. You know, why am I boring you with this? This is not what life in the universe is about. Life in the universe is about companionship. It's about, are we alone? Let's get real here. Okay, now I'm going to get real. Where are the aliens? Okay, let's get to the real thing. I've done that crappy, boring science stuff. You know, okay, this is how we find microbes. But we really are going to do it. Now let's go up the chain a bit. But I'm still going to stay with microbes a little bit, because microbes sure get dissed a lot. You know, microbes are kind of interesting, even for me as a kind of physical scientist. So we tend to underestimate. We think we're very smart and we have technology and all that stuff. But if we're starting to look for intelligent life in the universe, high-functioning, technological life, life with brains, we got to get our reference points. And once again, the Earth is our reference point. And I'll just make the obvious comment that the microbes have figured out some pretty clever things. Like they figured out how to make nanowires before we ever did in a lab. They can sense magnetic fields. They can operate commensally and in cooperation. They can exchange signals with reasonable bit rates, some forms of chemical communication. That's pretty clever. If you go up the chain a bit to things that are beneath our contempt for the most part, insects, you might notice that termites build mounds that scale to the organism are bigger than our tallest skyscrapers, and they have 5 different temperature control mechanisms built into the composites of natural substances that they put together to make these things. That's pretty cool. And social insects, obviously, you can just say they're all hardwired by evolution and they don't have any choice in the matter, but viewed from afar, again, if you're trying to distinguish intelligence and non-intelligence, it's not an easy call, because they do have stratification of communication, and highly organized functioning that is adaptive to their situation, their environment. And I think the point is not whether ants or termites or social insects are smart. The question is that evolution does not stand still. We view the natural world and the organisms we share the planet with at a snapshot of time where we happen to be king of the hill. And we are able to look down on them and say, well, yeah, that's fine, but you don't have cell phones. Come on, please, come back when you have wireless internet, and then we'll talk. You are not sophisticated, please. So that's what we think about, but the truth is evolution doesn't stand still. If we screw up this planet, which we're sort of doing in the margins, and we're not here in 1 million years, fair bet, I want to see what insects have done in 100 million years. Remember, there's many, many millions of species of them. There's way more of them than there are of us, and they're doing their thing quite happily and quite nicely. And of course, you talk about technology. Let me just diminish that envelope a little bit. Technology, yeah, we have technology, and sure, we have the technology I just alluded to, but if you're talking about technology as life's solution to problems, then it's pretty impressive. If you make a list of things that animals, and sometimes very small animals 100 million years ago, invented before we did, it includes flight, sonar, magnetic sensing, infrared sensing, batteries, polarization, sense, fiber optics, holography, etc. I could make an even longer list. And you might say, well, yeah, but they weren't doing it, in labs and with, inventions and wearing white coats and stuff. But that's okay. They just did it, And then you work up the chain a bit, and you get maybe to things that we actually consider as pets, So there are creatures that can talk, creatures that have behaviors that look interesting. Alex the parrot, connection to the U of A there, talkative and playful, able to understand the concept of zero, which not all humans have can do. Rats, ticklish and curious, personality traits. Rats can anticipate sex, and some very beautiful experiments a decade ago showed that they can reflect on their own thinking. Metacognition is quite a high skill. So maybe we shouldn't diss rodents completely, but you've probably seen this. This is a crow, never been in this situation before, Caledonian crow called Betty. They like meat, and there's meat in a basket. She has a wire, but it's a straight wire. There happens to be a notch cut in the base of the thing holding the tube. Again, never been in this situation. First time, they use sticks in the wild, but not wire. She figures she can turn that into a lever. So that's a real-time experiment, and quite impressive. So that maybe that adjective bird brain is a pejorative. And then we have creatures that separated us from the tree of life, in the tree of life, hundreds of millions of years ago, and that have extraordinary capabilities. Cephalopods are shape-shifting creatures with distributed brains, where there's a central brain and a brain located on each arm. If the arm is severed, if the arm is severed, the arm will continue to move and camouflage to distract the predator. We just don't know how smart these creatures are. I've talked to divers who've been led on wild goose chases through the complex three-dimensional topology of a coral reef, basically getting the diver lost and then coming and retrieving the diver again. We can't communicate with these creatures, that's all. So these are the aliens that we coexist with on the planet. Maybe we should try and understand them first before we see what we get out there. And in terms of the ratio of brain mass to body mass, we're special, but we're not like off the chart. And some of these small brains are very, very well put together packages. So you go up to something like an orca, and it's a pretty close call. No natural enemies. We're their only enemy. Large brains, complex brains, languages. The orca pods in the St. Puget Sound have dialects not only at the level of different pods and subpods, but of family members, individual family members, or familial groupings. They are social animals that raise their young in the similar proportion of their total lifespan to humans raising their young. And then it starts to get less clear. Orcas mate for life, statistically we don't. And I think the problem with them is they don't have opposable thumbs, and so they've never done this wireless internet stuff, and they don't have bombs and they don't have cars. That's not really their loss. They're supremely adapted to their environment. But I'll make another point about evolution and time. On the left you see the rise in brain mass corresponding to the evolutionary surge that took us to the top of the pile. Notice it happened over the last 2 million years and in a real surge in the last 100,000 years. That brain mass increase is now plotted in terms of the ratio to body mass on the right, and the track of the apes, our ancestors, and that recent surge, taking us to an encephalization quotient of 7 on the right-hand edge, is shown. And the point is that an alien coming to this planet at almost any time in the last 50 million years and saying, "Take me to the brainy creatures," would have gone to the whales and the dolphins and their ancestors. It's a very recent thing that we've become the most encephalized creatures on Earth. So it doesn't stand still. It's a snapshot. And we don't know how this plays out in the future. We have no idea how evolution will take us. Life on Earth is already weird. There's some very weird life that we've already discussed. I think in general we could have levels of weirdness. At the macroscopic level, we could clearly have different cell types than we have now. We could have much more rapid rates of evolution based on something that does happen in life on Earth, which is swapping of genetic material in packages, either organisms co-opting each other or genetic swapping. It doesn't have to be the slow march of mutation and DNA variation. And then I think there's no reason the universe couldn't have created something other than a cell. You don't need a cell to have something that you might call biology, except you won't call it biology. You could have a network as opposed to a container that did everything fundamentally that biology does. And then some of these things could clearly scale up to the level of a planet. And you could have geoengineering of a planet by creatures that might be individually at the organism level quite small. If you're talking about the micro level, there's also possible weirdness. A variation, a small variation, would be just changing the genetic code a little bit. But that's very mild, that's modest. Let's go beyond that. You could go away from the central dogma of biology, the triad of DNA, RNA, and proteins, or you could go to non-carbon-based biology, or not using water as your solvent, as your medium. And then you could actually, there's room at the bottom. Although a human cell has a DVD's worth of information in it, in the genetic code, that's pretty impressive. That's not the limit of compactness that biochemistry could attain in principle. Now, whether it happens in practice, who knows? And so you could have even higher density and perhaps vastly speeded up scale evolution with a totally different basis. So I'm obviously getting wildly speculating here, but the point is, for exobiology, we don't know what to expect. And some of these forms of life, we look at the conjunct of things that use planets, that use carbon, that use DNA as their genetic material, but the conjunct of those might be unrecognizable if one of those things doesn't apply, or none of them apply. So let's just look a little into the future, because it's a snapshot right now. So what might change? The singularity, as you probably know, is a term invented by Ray Kurzweil. Actually not, he popularized it. It was invented before him. But it's a reference to the fact that at our stage of evolution, we may pass through a membrane where we become post-biological. And once again, if we're not special, if the Copernican principle applies, that could have happened elsewhere in the universe. And given the time available, it may well have happened. And looking at this, the increase of information in the genetic form of evolution has been dwarfed by cultural evolution, when we invented civilization and books, and then dwarfed yet again by digital evolution, our modern technology. So the rate of information encoding, flow, transmittal, and growth is now 10 to the 18 times higher than it is with biology alone acting over time. That's an incredible acceleration. If you project Moore's law and its equivalence in networking, you actually get to a position where you could approximate the capacity in the human brain in terms of network connections in about 20 years. And remember, this was ENIAC, and this was a computer a long time ago that was in the size of a family home, took about a third of the power of Philadelphia to run it, had 5 technicians full-time changing valves, and this is 50 times worse than whatever smartphone you have in your pocket. So things don't stand still, and what matters really is the capacity of the total package, not just the processor. And so people with robots have shown how connecting simple machines that have sensing capability and linking them with a neural net, so it has the capacity to self-program and to learn from its environment. It's not intelligent. The intelligence is not put in. It emerges from the base level. This creates some interesting possibilities. It's machine intelligence, but of course it's facilitated by humans. So after iterations of this, again, these behaviors are not programmed into the little robots at all.